Hey there, welcome back to the show. This is Phil Vischer. I am here with Christian Taylor.
Hey, Phil Vischer.
Hi, Christian.
Why do you have those headphones on?
Because we have a guest.
We have a guest.
Because we have a guest. I hadn't gotten to that
Sorry.
part yet. Who is pretty and...
I'm blue today.
That's very subdued.
It is.
It's not at
what
all
does it
bright.
look like on...
That's not at all
almost
bright.
looks like white.
Yeah, it's almost white. Light blue, and it's a lovely little checky pattern.
You know why? This is my Explorer shirt from Eddie Bauer.
Eddie Bauer. Yeah, that looks explorer-y.
Yeah. I'm going to go on a hike after this.
Kind of like Banana Republic, the original Banana Republic.
It is kind of like that.
Not the new.
Do you remember?
Are you old enough to remember the original Banana Republic?
They used to have like
when
safari
it was like
hats.
Isn't that Honduras?
Safari clothes?
No,
No,
it's
not
a store.
historically the store. The original Banana Republic store.
I didn't pay any attention to clothing before I was 20.
Okay, you probably missed it.
Do you remember? It had like in the store like
like it was
raffia
British
and...
explorers.
Yes.
That was the thing. That was the vibe
so cool.
for Banana Republic was the British Empire exploration days.
And now it's about as opposite of that as you can get.
Then at some point someone said, "Hey, guys, this is really stupid. Let's do something that people will buy."
Now it looks like every other store.
Sky Jitani.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for this
We're
wonderful...
off on our own older person kick over here.
Who is...
Were you even born when Banana Republic came to be?
Back in Black. I think he was. Yeah,
I probably was, but I
born.
didn't spend my adolescence in a mall
Where'd you spend it?
in front of a TV like everyone else.
like healthy Christians.
That's right.
Okay, I'm singing. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Sky
Hi, Phil.
and Christian too.
Hello, Phil.
Hi, and we've got a guest. Yes, David Kinnaman's here for you.
Woohoo!
Hi, David Kinnaman.
Hey, how's it going, Phil?
Pretty good, thanks, but I have to finish the song now. Hey, it's a podcast, so lend it. So what's the line? Lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
You shouldn't try to get too cute with that because you forget where you are.
I throw myself off. I'm easily thrown off by myself.
Yes, you are.
I don't know why. I think I'm less thrown off by other people like interrupting me than I am with myself interrupting me.
That's probably true.
Because then my brain goes off in a different direction.
Isn't that attention deficit disorder?
You always want to put a sticker on me. You always want to label me with some sort of...
How about you're a tough dog to keep on the porch?
That is so true.
Yes. Is that what they used to call ADD?
I actually think that's what they used to say about Bill Clinton.
I really like that. I've never heard it, and it totally goes so well. Mm-hmm. I have so many things I'm going to use that on now.
Okay. This is our first show back from Halloween.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Did you dress up?
The last time I dressed up for Halloween, I think I was about 4 feet tall. Maybe in high school.
And this is when
I don't even think I did it in high school.
This is when you and your mother disagree.
Yes, over whether I ever dressed up as the devil.
Right, the devil, that's it.
Phil just likes to dress up puppets now.
That's right.
I mentioned
Have
that.
You made a devil puppet?
A devil puppet?
No.
Good gravy.
Go ahead. You mentioned what to what.
That would lead to idol worship and who knows voodoo and who knows what else. I made a comment about that at church on Sunday, and somebody came up to me. No, somebody who was actually a podcast listener at church came up to me and said, I have a recollection of us dressing up as all sorts of bizarre things when we were kids, like devils and stuff.
This person was referring to you?
No, that they too had those
but not
recollections.
With you.
With me? No.
Well, I thought that you were verifying your memory by saying, I remember dressing up as a devil with you.
With you. No, I lived in Iowa when I was
Well, that's what was
little,
weird.
Remember
little.
Muscatine.
Tiny.
We all know.
So I'm wondering how many conservative Christians have memories of dressing up as things 40 years ago that would be completely unacceptable to dress up as now. Like, the sexy vicar. I think that's a costume.
Well,
now,
actually, I posted my article about Halloween on Facebook, and my brother commented and said that if he goes to Walmart and sees a sexy pastor costume, he's out. He's done with Halloween.
He's out of Halloween, or he's out of religion, or he's out of Walmart.
I thought he's out of religion anyway.
I think he was referring to out of Halloween. Like that's
Okay,
where
out
it
of
will go
Halloween.
too far. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can get
your
that.
family usually does a whole theme.
Yeah.
But I didn't see anything
So
about
we had
that
a problem.
They
The other
didn't.
on Friday.
Oh, they didn't?
No.
Well, here's the thing. On Friday, the kids' school did the parade.
Right.
So I was out there, and our
That should be
friend of
illegal.
the podcast, Josh Lindsay, was there.
Okay.
And as we were leaving, we were walking back to our cars together, and he said, "Well, what's your family's theme this year?" Because he saw Isaac and Lucy, my two younger kids, in the parade, and he was trying to piece it together. Lucy went as an old woman. This was
How
her
old
choice.
is she How old is now?
she?
She's in second grade.
Okay.
Okay.
And
were
why?
there a lot of the elderly in second grade this year? Was that a popular
that
costume?
was her thing. She
Is there a
really-
new elderly character in the new Star Wars that all the kids are dressing up
Not
like?
that I'm aware of, but she
It's-
really
it's called
wanted,
Harrison
she
Ford.
wanted to be an old woman. And then Isaac went. He basically looked like a Grim Reaper. So Josh said, "Now, do you have like a death theme this
I know
year?"
where that's going.
And I said, "Yeah, Lucy's an old woman near death. Isaac's the Grim Reaper. I'm a suicide terrorist." And but no, we didn't have a theme. And the problem is, I have an 8th grader, and the theme, she's too cool for school.
Yeah.
She's not gonna
Yeah,
go
she's
in
not
on the
gonna
theme
do
with
it.
us.
Yes, my
So it all
8th
fell
grader
apart.
decided he was going to hand out candy this year.
Hmm.
So not one person in my family did anything
Wow.
except hand out candy.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, we
when you cross
graduated.
that, we cross that threshold.
From a taker to a giver.
David
Yeah.
Kinnaman. If you don't know who David Kinnaman is the president of the Barna Research Group. He is the George Gallup of the church. Does it say that on your license plate frame?
Well, it says that 98% of people have no idea who I am.
And the other 2% can't
It's
get.
Phil and Sky.
Did you trick or treat this year?
No, we bought a Wookiee costume for my 5th grader, and then he looked great in it. His older sister, who's a freshman in high school, also dressed up as a Wookiee, so they were going to be like a whole Wookiee community.
Yeah.
And then my son got what do you get when you're a Wookiee? Cold feet.
Yeah.
He had-
Cold
hairy
furry feet.
cold hairy feet. So he decided he just wanted to sit home and play a game. So that was what we did. Passed out.
So she bailed too?
No, she was having fun in the Wookiee costume.
Oh,
She
so
was-
you had a solo Wookiee instead of a Wookiee clan.
That's right.
All of my trainers at my gym,
Yeah.
they dressed up as all the Star Wars characters. And so there
All
was
of
a
them?
Wow. There was Darth Vader and a Stormtrooper and Darth Maul and Princess Leia and Han Solo. And they were all in there training. It was pretty cool.
Wow.
How many trainers do you need?
Well, I had 2 that day. I had Han and Leia. They got me right into shape.
Actually, on Halloween night, I was at a church down in Naperville, Compass Church in Naperville, because they had an event and they did a Galaxy Buck screening.
Oh, that's awesome.
On Halloween night, a big family event, and had like 500 people come out. But it was also their, Halloween alternative festival. And so they had lots of games and stuff for the kids, and all the kids were in costume. And I was surprised how many were in costume as the new bad guy from Star Wars.
The Kylo Ren.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Oh, I don't
the
even know
name.
who that is.
Yeah, so he's not even out.
Yeah.
You haven't even seen the film, but everybody wants to be him for Halloween.
Why is being the bad guy so fun?
Because the bad guy's always more fun.
I know.
Bad guys have more fun.
Especially on Halloween.
Yeah, because they don't have to follow the rules. And we Americans, if there's anything we hate, is having to follow the rules.
But the bad guys in Star Wars always wear black and have a mask. And
Yeah.
that's just Halloween-y.
That's true.
Exactly. So when kids came to your door, David, did you hand out surveys?
Yeah, absolutely. I asked them what they wanted to do with their life. We had a question about whether they were born again Christian.
Or just notional Christian?
Exactly. I asked them what their favorite candy was. So how about that?
And then how did candy preference divide up along religious lines?
Well, we noticed that there was no statistical difference between those who preferred Kit Kats and those,
Wow.
and those who preferred evangelicals.
Universalists like Kit Kats
Why is that, Sky?
Why is that, Sky?
because they think everyone should get a break.
Oh, did you just pull that?
Did you make that up?
One up. How about that?
That's pretty impressive.
Okay.
Sky Dathani is absolutely rocking the candy humor today, guys. That's
He
amazing.
is.
Yeah. He's definitely leading in that department. Sky and I were both on Moody Radio on, was that Friday? Thursday?
Yeah, but we
Friday.
weren't on together.
I know.
Which
That's
was
the funny
weird.
thing. We were
Yeah.
both on Moody Radio
And I wasn't.
in the same hour. in their morning show,
Right.
but booked completely separately and doing separate things.
That happened at Biola, remember?
Except that we were there at the same time and we actually spoke on stage together.
Yeah, but when they booked us,
They didn't know
that
we knew each other.
Right.
So did Moody Bible like purposefully book you together?
No.
Really?
No, although they knew that we knew each other. But no, you were coming in to talk about one thing and I was coming in
What were
to
you
talk
talking about?
Galaxy Buck.
And what were you talking
Galaxy Buck.
They wanted me to talk about With.
about? Still?
Yeah.
That's
He's
like
still- he's
old
still milking
news.
that cow.
I didn't push it. They contacted me. I'm telling you.
That cow's like Betty White.
That's not right.
That is not right. I'm with him.
Okay. So the reason we have David here, besides pestering him about his Halloween practices, is to talk about a new study published by the Barna Research Group. And you're the president of that group, right?
I am.
What do you know about that? Did you know that, Christian?
Okay, they're kidding me because I didn't know that. In fact, I really don't even know much about the Barna Group. So I'm sure there's some listeners out there that may not
Yes,
know.
it's like Gallup for the church.
Okay, and how long has it been around? And did David start it?
1984?
1984, yeah, so it's 31 years, and a guy by the name of George Barna started it.
Okay.
His last name's Barna. That's hence the name.
Right.
Otherwise, it'd be the Kinnaman Group.
And he started it because there was a need for...
Yeah, he wanted to do do research to help the church, correct?
Yeah, he'd been doing a bunch of stuff in advertising and other kind of market research companies and felt like there was a real gap in trying to help Christian organizations. I think, in fact, the Billy Graham Association contacted their ad agency and they were like, I think that Barna guy is a Christian. Why don't you go and talk to him? And so after doing some work on the side for some of these different Christian groups, George realized there could be a real gap in trying to help provide market research for Christian organizations.
Okay, and so obviously it's been helpful because it's still around.
Mm-hmm. It's still there. And
One of the
now,
most reputable brands out there.
Yeah, and David Kinnaman is a multi-billionaire.
That is
now.
Probably not true, or he would not be on our podcast.
Ooh.
Ouch.
Sorry,
Okay.
David.
Okay, so Barna did a study, The State of Religious Freedom in the U.S. This is what we wanted to talk about today because it's pertinent.
All right.
It's timely. It's pertinent. Everybody's talking about it. Religious freedom and Halloween.
And most of us Americans are so afraid we're losing our religious
I
freedom.
know I've lost almost all of my religious freedom.
I had Halloween trick-or-treaters ask me about religious freedom just on Saturday night.
You did not.
That's true.
You're making
Did you
that
really?
up. What was the question?
You really did?
No, I didn't. That was a joke, guys.
Well, they know. I mean, people used to come to my house dressed as VeggieTales characters for Halloween because they knew it was my house, which got a little old after a while, but you know.
Because you had to feign
Like a
excitement.
a whole family that didn't live in our neighborhood would show up at our door dressed as VeggieTales characters.
And would you answer?
Yeah. Oh, hi.
So they were like stalkers.
Kind of. Yeah.
That's
You're
awkward.
not from our
So
neighborhood,
what
are
is
you?
it? What does it mean that a whole family came
Did you
into
drive all the way from Indiana?
a whole family came into my door dressed as pigs?
Really?
Yeah. These kids were the three little pigs, and the two youngest girls were so frightened by my appearance they wouldn't come near the door.
They thought you were a terrorist.
They thought you were Muslim.
I
and
don't
that
know
they
what
were
they
offending
thought.
Did you have
They
on a
thought-
burqa?
No, all I had on was a Davy Crockett hat.
And
I mean,
nothing else?
That would scare me too.
Why wouldn't they come in my house?
I can't understand that.
You had a Davy Crockett hat on.
Yeah.
That was your costume.
Well, Amanda, my wife, said to me, "Look, if you're going to be home answering the door, you got to have something on." And I just went into
you
the
were buck naked.
I went into the bucket, and that's the only thing I could find. And it was kind of cold and wet and rainy that day, so this would keep me warm.
Okay.
So I just had a Davy Crockett hat.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get back on track.
All
We're
right.
here
State
talking
of
to David
religious freedom
Kinnaman
in
about
the
the state
US.
of religious freedom in the U.S.
A new study from Barna Group reveals the tension many Americans are feeling on the topic of religious freedom. Overall, the research reveals a significant rise in Americans' belief that religious freedom is worse today than 10 years ago.
That is what I said.
So basically, they did this study in 2012.
Okay.
And then they did it again in 2015. And they compared the difference, and the difference is pretty striking.
Really?
Yes.
In just 3 years?
In just 3 years. Concern about religious freedom in the U.S. has grown almost In every segment since the 2012 study, the growth from 1/3 of the general population expressing concern over religious freedom in 2012 to more than 4 in 10. So now 41%, and that's the overall population, has gone from 33% to 41%. But among millennials, the growth was even more. Been a 9 percentage point increase in those who say that religious freedom is worse today than it was 10 years ago, and even more among Gen Xers.
That's because those guys just found out what religious freedom was.
Millennials, because they finally got to that class in
Something like that.
college.
So, David, what's your interpretation of the growth? Why has there been such a spike?
Well, sometimes when people ask me my interpretation of a growth, they think I'm an oncologist trying to help them figure out their...
Is that what you dressed up as Halloween for Halloween?
He dressed up as a growth.
Let me see your moles.
So, I think what's happening is there's, a lot of attention that's being paid to this issue of religious freedom. I think the last couple of years, and in particular the SCOTUS decision, the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage, is an example of that, where people are starting to recognize that there could be some implications. Another study we did recently looked at whether people, it was actually in relation to the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage, and 1 in 5 Americans believe that religious clergy should be legally forced or legally compelled to give same-sex marriage ceremonies, which is still a minority of Americans, but it's 1 in 5 Americans think that that should happen. So I think that's an example of the kind of conversation that's beginning to bubble up and affecting people's perceptions of this thing called religious liberty or religious freedom.
Can I ask sort of I don't know, it's probably a simple question.
Go for it.
So when we're talking about, American religious freedom, does that mean religious freedom for every religion?
Well, the concept of religious freedom, of course, is that everyone should have the freedom to practice their religion in the public square. What's interesting is that Christians are far more likely to sort of favor a home team version of religious freedom. So evangelicals, for instance, 76% believe that traditional Judeo-Christian values should be given preference in the U.S. So I think that's part of the interesting tension that Christians are feeling, is they're the ones that feel the most pressure related to religious freedom, and in some ways they're kind of favoring the hometown discount, and that's I think part of the challenge. There's a little bit of a wanting our cake and eating it too.
Right.
So the research is showing that evangelicals are the most frightened about losing religious freedom, but it sounds like they may not completely understand what it means if they're wanting to give preference to one religious tradition.
Okay, so we'll dig into this. More than 3/4 of evangelicals say religious liberty is worse off today than 10 years ago. In 2012, it was 60%. It's grown to 77%. So that's just 3 years, 60% to 77%. And this survey was taken just before the Kim Davis stuff went big, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So do you assume it'd be even a little bigger now?
It's hard to say. Usually one-off things, even though Kim Davis was a massive kind of set of questions related to religious liberty, usually it takes a cumulative, it's more like a bunch of snowflakes than it would be one single event.
Oh, okay.
And so maybe it would have grown some, but
you just said the Supreme Court decision changed it.
Well, that's one of a series of examples. Obviously, that was a pretty significant one.
That was a huge snowflake.
Yeah, it was. A blizzard. Yeah.
Now, your results also say that even among atheists, agnostics, and the religiously unaffiliated, there's an upsurge in those who believe religious freedom has grown worse in the past 10 years. 23% of atheists in 2012, up to 32% in 2015. So here's a question. How did you phrase the question in a way? Do you have any idea if atheists that say religious freedom has gotten worse were saying that was a bad thing, or were saying that was a good thing?
Well, one of the ways we could look at that was their level of personal concern about that. So among atheists and agnostics, people that have no faith, 32%, as you said, believe that it's gotten worse, but only 23% are very concerned about it. So it seems as though there's among evangelicals, they believe it's gotten worse, and the vast majority of those also believe they're very concerned about it.
Yeah.
So, one way to think about that is that about a third of the no faith segment is believes it's gotten worse, but isn't very concerned about that, and the rest of them actually are concerned. And I think that's one of the themes of this research, is that across the board, it is becoming increasingly challenging for people to talk about what divides them. And in some ways, we have this like just huge magnet at the center of our culture that is saying everyone should really kind of think alike and act alike, and religion, to the extent that it makes us different, ought to be sort of, pushed to the side, pushed to the sidelines. You can practice it on Sunday mornings in your church, but it shouldn't have any kind of impact on our public square. And I think that's part of what people are experiencing, is this notion of it's really hard to have a distinct and what might be almost an extremist point of view. And I think all segments, Christian and otherwise, are starting to really feel that pressure.
Right. Okay. Now, I'm digging into specific results. 96% of evangelicals believe that true religious freedom means all citizens must have freedom of conscience.
Yeah, this is one of the most universal perceptions that all different faith groups believe, that more than 9 out of 10 Americans believe that particular statement, that freedom of religion means that citizens should have freedom of conscience.
What does that mean, freedom of conscience?
To follow your religion without, according to the dictates
whatever
of your
your
conscience.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't.
So why wouldn't you just say you should have freedom of religion to practice whatever religion you want?
Freely and religiously.
Well, there's legally a difference between freedom of religious practice and freedom of religious conscience.
Yeah, because baking a cake for a homosexual couple has nothing to do with religious practice. It has to do with conscience.
Okay. My
conscience tells me this is wrong according to my religious beliefs, so I need to be excused. And we do, and it's amazing. It's amazing how many, my wife keeps texting me and it keeps popping up on the Skype signal. It's amazing how many cases there are, of people from all religious backgrounds, Christian included, asking for exceptions. A Muslim truck driver saying, I will not deliver alcohol with my truck. So if my employer is requiring me to deliver alcohol, I need an exemption. The employer said, no, you're fired. The government went to court and said, no, he is allowed to have that exemption. And that happens for Christians. It happens for Muslims. It happens for Hindus. There's a tremendous amount of case work every year where you see people getting those exemptions. And it has nothing to do with religious practice. It's conscience. It's what your religion dictates.
And this is becoming a contentious issue internationally, because the United States and some other more liberal countries are trying to get conservative countries to open up to other religious traditions. For example, Saudi Arabia has a very restrictive law. They technically have some form of protection of religious freedom of worship, meaning you can be a Christian in Saudi Arabia and worship as a Christian privately, but you don't have freedom of conscience. You can't go out into the public square and proclaim your Christian faith. So internationally, we want to see more countries open up to freedom of religious conscience.
I see.
But most of them say no to that. We'll let you practice your religion privately, but we don't want you having the freedom to do things publicly. And that's a big sticking point. And unfortunately, some people fear that same attitude is coming to the United States now, where you can be a Christian privately, but don't bring it into the public square.
But in Saudi Arabia, are other religions allowed to be practiced publicly, or
No.
do they treat Christianity the same as all the other religions?
Anything that isn't Islam.
Right.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So their majority religion, like Christian is here, if they started talking about religious freedom for everyone.
Yeah, it wouldn't fly. But that's what makes the United States so distinct and important, and why our Constitution and the First Amendment is so valuable, is because it doesn't just guarantee a freedom of worship, but a freedom of conscience.
Right. And it's why we also can't use examples from other countries to say, we're losing religious freedom, because you might be picking countries that never had it,
right?
As examples. You really need to focus it on America. Okay, how many evangelicals agree that religious freedom has become more restricted in the U.S. because some groups have actually tried to move society away from traditional Christian values? What percentage of evangelicals? Christian Taylor.
Oh, I would say more than 70.
96. Same percentage that believe religious freedom means freedom of conscience
Those
for
are
everybody.
Contradictory.
But no, not necessarily. They're saying that our religious freedom is being reduced by the specific work of specific groups. There are groups out to get religious freedom.
Okay.
Which I don't know that I would disagree with that. Because there are groups, like Americans for the Separation of Church and State, or in the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Yeah, but you know what they mean.
Yeah, right. I don't think they mean those groups.
Most people are responding
I think
to
most
the
people are
what
thinking
they mean. That's
about
the next question.
homosexual groups.
Wait a minute.
That's what they're thinking.
David, did you see how they jumped all over me there?
And
Yeah. The next question. How many evangelicals agree with the statement that the gay and lesbian community is the most active group trying to remove Christian values from the country?
It's over 75.
68.
Okay.
Actually, it's under 75.
All right. Well, I was close.
got you there, didn't we, Christian?
How many atheists, agnostics, and unaffiliated believe that the LGBT community is the group most responsible for the reduction of Christian values?
Under 50%.
0%.
16%.
I was close.
16%.
So,
I'm surprised that anybody would say it was.
David, is it fair to say then that there is the battle lines are drawn between evangelicals and the LGBT community over religious liberty?
I think that's the way it's shaping up.
Well, I don't need a survey to tell me that.
Well, but you hear that rhetoric in the media, but here's statistics that actually back it up.
And okay.
Yeah, and I think some of the work we're working on now is showing just how different the points of view are when you just compare the evangelical community to that of the LGBT community, and their attitudes related to all sorts of things, just socially in terms of sexuality in the public square, sex and sexuality on television, just all sorts of things. It's a very interesting sort of group, and I think this is when I talk about this giant magnet at the center of our sort of shared culture. What I perceive to be happening is that the persuasion of most of culture is changing to be more in line with what the LGBT community is sensing about the world. Clearly, just public opinion has shifted. It's not obviously universal. There's a lot of people that have major questions about same-sex marriage, for instance, and other things. But what's happened is that our culture has shifted to this place where the magnet at the center feels more in line with some of the cultural messages that the LGBT community is saying, like you shouldn't criticize someone else's life choices.
Right.
And so evangelicals are at a very different point on a lot of this stuff. And so, yeah, I think we end up being kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum on so many different points on this type of question about something like religious liberty.
Aren't we setting ourselves up for defeat, though, when we paint it as a zero-sum game, that it's either religious liberty or LGBT rights, and there really are, I don't know of any significant public voices, whether they're media, politicians, church leaders, who are arguing that, you know what, it is possible to respect the rights of LGBT Americans and hold in high regard religious liberty. Everyone wants to present it as it's either or because that's better for politics and scaring people into the voting booth on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And is that because the way the argument over LGBT rights has been played out in the last 10 years has been primarily about redefining marriage, which we believe is really, really Christian in its historical definition, so that what they're fighting for does appear to be radically rewriting, the values of the country?
Yeah, I think that's why evangelicals would be concerned about that they feel like there's some fundamental questions about life and how to live it that are being redefined. I mean, and what's interesting is so many aspects of our culture. We were joking before we came on the air about the notion of adulthood being redefined, about emotional maturity, or marriage, that you should get married when you're emotionally ready or when you're financially secure. And so much of our culture is redefining many of the key elements, some of the kind of big beats of what it meant to grow up and to be an adult.
Right.
And I think marriage and I think work is being redefined about how quickly you can get out of your work phase of life so you can retire and, have the billions of dollars that people that own survey research companies have.
Right.
So, I think this notion of redefining so many aspects of our culture is part of what's at stake. And I think, Scott, you said earlier this question of practice, sort of practicing your faith versus freedom of conscience. And I think that's what's so interesting is that it seems as though for those that are skeptical of faith, they're fine with faith as long as it's on Sunday morning or in the privacy of your own sort of worship community. Mm-hmm. But those beliefs shouldn't affect the rest of society, which in and of itself is a logical fallacy. I mean, whatever we believe will inevitably affect how we live our life and how we have a shared community.
You know what's ironic about it is I think the best speech I've ever heard about the importance of religion in the public square was given by Senator Barack Obama in 2006.
No way.
It's phenomenal.
You're lying.
No, I'm not.
Where would I find that?
You can look it online. It's 2006, Senator Obama.
People are going to start thinking.
Well, no, but here's the problem: is when you go
in
back,
his back pocket.
When you go back and listen to or read that speech, he gives this whole argument as to why religion must be in the public square, and he goes through American history and all the great reforms that happened because of religious beliefs, whether it was abolition or women's rights movement or civil rights, and then you look at what's happened over his administration. And the statistics that David's presented here back that up, that so many Christians believe that religious liberty is being eroded and religion pushed out of the public square. So it's a shame that the Barack Obama and the administration we've gotten for the last 6 years doesn't match the rhetoric we heard in 2006.
I have a question. Aside from what all people say they believe in this survey, is it actually true?
Ouch.
No.
Which part?
Well, I mean, if we're doing a survey of, I'm assuming it's where we said atheists and evangelical Christians. Is that the two
Well, it's
groups?
everyone. It's a survey of everyone. It's the general public and then broken out by evangelicals, practicing Christians, other faiths, and then atheists, agnostics, and unaffiliated.
And so all of this is what people believe.
Yes.
Okay. But is it really true?
We have the wrong guest for that.
Oh.
We have a pollster on the phone, not a prophet.
All right.
The prophet is sitting in black on your other side. So let's stick with the poll right now because we have the guy who did it and can illuminate it.
That sounds like a great book, The Pollster and the Prophet.
That does.
Yeah.
All right, well, what else can the pollster tell us?
Traditional Judeo-Christian values should be given preference in the United States.
This is the one that really gets my panties in a bunch.
Oh, dear.
There we are talking about panties again.
That's what he was wearing in addition to his coonskin cap when he opened the door for the trick-or-treaters. Evangelicals, 76% say traditional Judeo-Christian values should be given preference in the United States, and that is 22 points higher than 3 years ago when only 54% said that.
Okay.
Wow.
That's weird.
That is
so,
weird.
David, here's the question. If so many evangelicals think Christianity should be given preference in the United States and 90-some%...
that was not the question asked.
Judeo-Christian values?
Values.
Okay, fine.
Judeo-Christian values.
If they should be given preference in the United States, but 90-some% of them are worried that religious liberty is eroding, how do you explain that? Because does that mean evangelicals don't have a very good definition of religious liberty if they want to give preference to one tradition over another?
But my question is... The question seems to be about values, which is not the same as religious practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where...
What do you think, David?
I think evangelicals are referring to, I should say this, as researchers, we can't ever surmise as to what they're thinking about, but we do talk about the phrasing of the survey is about Judeo-Christian values, not necessarily the Christian religion. And so, Phil, I think you brought up the kind of exception that a Christian would sort of raise, which is that if we've traditionally thought about marriage in a particular way that has a Judeo-Christian background, or if we even think about religious liberty, the concept of itself comes from a Judeo-Christian concept, the notion that all religions ought to be respected and that people ought to, there's a personalism that we respect the rights of individuals. And so I think there is some sense that if you remove Christian values, Judeo-Christian values from the center of the public square, and it simply becomes a majority vote, there can be some problems. And I think good thinkers and good politicians and legal minds could imagine some of those problems. Whether evangelicals have that in mind or not, clearly a lot of our polling in other cases shows that Christians are. It's an interesting time for evangelicals because they've sort of been the rudder for the Christian community, even though they represent a very small segment of the total Christian population in America. They've been the most vocal, the most active. In a lot of ways, they've been able to have their way. And I think this is one of the opportunities for us as Christians. The thing we have pointed to, or I've sort of used to interpret a lot of this data, is the notion of being like Daniel in Babylon, that it's time for us to have a brand new concept of what it means to be faithful in a new context. Daniel serves in one of the most pagan civilizations in human history, is able to rise to a level of essentially being a secretary of state through the faithful practice of his beliefs. And most importantly, through God showing up and helping him, be a prophet in his times. Who knows? Maybe he was a pollster too.
But David, with Daniel, using Daniel as a reference assumes that America is Babylon, not Israel.
Well, interestingly enough, I think that part of what's happening is that, basically, I call it digital Babylon. And what's interesting is that I think every form of institution is having sort of a decreased influence on our lives. So we still live in the legacy of a great, country when obviously sort of politics and government and media still have an influence. But what's happening in what I call digital Babylon is that all the rules are changed. You can have tremendous influence. Katy Perry has something like 80 million Twitter followers. She's more influential than NBC or CBS, right? And so we live in this new context where, we're imagining a certain type of political power if we could have, the Supreme Court agree with us, but that ignores the fact that for the most part, our morality, our sense of right and wrong, what's up and what's down, all that's being redefined by the television shows that we watch and the way that we perceive scripture. And so being faithful in this new digital Babylon does require us to sort of think about influence in a new way, not just political influence, but, a whole range of other kinds of implications.
Okay.
There it is. The pollster and the prophet in digital Babylon.
Ooh, it's getting better by the minute. You didn't really take my bait in my comparison of whether America was Babylon or Israel, God's chosen people, but that's okay because it's probably beyond your purview.
Okay, can we go back for a minute?
Yeah, where are we going back?
We're going back to the...
Let's go back to when America was Christian.
Right.
How about that, Sky?
Sky doesn't believe that was true.
The idea that Judeo-Christian values should be given preference.
Yeah.
So
should any values be given preference?
Hold on. I think David is right that an awful lot of what is American culture has Judeo-Christian influence and origins, including the Constitution of the United States and individual liberties and things like that. The problem is that as a society 239 years ago, we made the decision that the foundational document of our laws would not be the Bible.
Yes.
It would be the Constitution of the United States. And to the degree to which the Constitution is influenced by Judeo-Christian values, they should influence the culture.
Okay.
But that's different than saying Judeo-Christian values should be given preference. I think a lot of people would say, I think the values of the Constitution should be given preference.
So then would you say American values should be given preference?
Well, then
that's
we
the
should
debate.
say in
What
the
are they?
Constitution we trust.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the other problem. And this is where constitutionalists kind of drive me up the wall. Everyone wants to talk about how the Constitution is like this divine document that God has given us to...
Yeah, it was written by Jesus and edited by Paul.
The Constitution also said that black people are 3/5 of a white person.
It wasn't in the. Was that in the Constitution?
That is in the Constitution.
Yeah.
So
that was an edit that was probably made by Augustine.
So the idea that this is an immutable, inerrant document.
No, it's not.
Obviously, it isn't.
God did not write the Constitution.
Anyway, but yeah, that it does bother me a little bit because I think what's behind, at least some people I know, the assumption of the preference for Judeo-Christian values is, well, there should be a menorah and a Christmas tree allowed in the public square in town during the holidays, but not an atheist monument, and certainly not a Muslim monument.
Right, because atheism is against American values, aka Christian values.
Except for the 10% of Americans who are atheists.
But even if you're an American, I'm not actually arguing the point I just made, but even if you are an American citizen and you are against representative democracy, isn't it fair to say you are not really in line with American values?
Yeah, until you can get enough people to change those values.
I guess, yeah, okay.
I mean, we're a free market economy and a free market of ideas.
We are. So the notion that, hey, all other immigrant groups assimilated and learned English and became American, you think that's...
Well, I think that's what's being debated. I think that's what gives a lot of conservative Republican candidates so much ammunition, is this idea that what people used to assume as American isn't anymore because of a lot of things.
Right.
That's where the whole argument comes that everyone should learn English. And
yeah, I know. Exactly.
Bilingual schools and things are un-American.
Exactly. And Republican candidates who answer a question in a town hall meeting in Spanish are un-American. Okay. David Kinnaman. One last area of interest. When you break things out by age, it is very interesting how much change there were in the youngest Christians over the last 3 years. That in 2012, millennials, actually all millennials, not just Christians, all millennials agreeing that religious freedom has become more restricted in the United States. 2012, 27% agreed of millennials. 2015, it was up to 42%. And then Christian millennials is 71% who believe religious freedom is becoming more restricted, which is higher than, it's the same as Gen Xers. Oh no, the headphone amp fell down. The same as Gen Xers. My set's falling apart. Sorry, everyone.
That's what happens when you quote too many stats.
Yeah, we've gone too far, but actually less than boomers. So more millennials think we're losing religious freedom than baby boomers. Our parents think we're losing religious freedom.
That is interesting.
How is that even possible?
Well,
because I've seen millennials in like Apple TV commercials and Mountain Dew TV commercials, and they are so good looking and so fun loving, and they don't seem judgmental at all. I can't even imagine them caring.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of the most surprising parts of the survey, which was that the growth of there again with the growth of people's perceptions of this, especially among younger Christians, was really striking. And all I can imagine is that they've seen their Twitter feed and their Facebook pages sort of light up with conversations about these things. There was the Indiana RFRA law. There was the SCOTUS decision. Some of the data was collected right at the very beginning of the Kim Davis stuff. And so I think all those things cumulatively could have some impact in terms of their perceptions of why this would be a big issue. Even some of the contraceptive, healthcare mandate and the Hobby Lobby case. I think all of these things are starting to show up on people's radar, and essentially the data is such that boomers are no different. They're no more likely or less likely than millennial Christians to be aware or concerned about those issues.
Statistically identical within the margin of error.
So correct. This number right here is
that's all millennials.
All millennials. So my question is, do you think it's higher because they're thinking religious freedom meaning all religions? And so that's why they're saying?
That could be, yeah. What about all millennials in general, or are the numbers? No, because the Christian millennials, the number didn't go up in 3 years. So that means that non-Christian millennials went up significantly. David?
I'm not sure that I know what column we're looking at, but
you don't have all this in your head. Okay, 2012, practicing Christian millennials, 71%. Agree religious freedom is becoming more restricted. 2015, 71%. So it actually didn't change. But the overall country went from 27% of millennials to 42% of millennials, which means the growth was all in non-Christian millennials.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right, which I'm saying maybe they think it's all religions are not having enough freedom.
And are more upset about what they hear about happening to Muslims and others.
Could be.
I wonder if it's partly, this is total speculation, obviously.
That's what we're doing.
That's what we do.
That's why we're here.
And we review movies we've never seen. That the younger generation is far more engaged in online communities where the rhetoric is more severe
Right.
And I mean, we've read the comments in many of the blog posts and stories that are online, and religion gets just destroyed
I'm
regularly.
thinking about Facebook news posts,
Yeah.
News streams in particular, because in my own extended family, the most aggressive political voices we've noticed are the youngest, and it's everyone getting stuff and forwarding on Facebook. Not getting traditional news from traditional sources, which tend to be more metered, at least attempt to be balanced. We're getting stuff just forwarded, emails forwarded, and Facebook posts forwarded that tend to be more extreme. So there's I'm really going out on a speculative ledge here, but in the younger members of my own community, I'm noticing less trust for more institutional news sources. Time Magazine, morning show, CBS, evening news, and more trust in whatever shows up in their inbox.
Right.
Which tends to be more extreme and exaggerated.
Exactly, because when you need clicks online, you have to be more extreme in every way.
We solved it. David, would you like to publish what we just figured out as an official finding?
Yeah, our sample size of 3. I think it's going to be great. No, I think you guys are on to the very. I think this makes sense with a lot of the other stuff we're finding, which is this influence of digital Babylon, that young people trust things that seem legitimate and websites that look like they've got something important to say.
Yep.
What's interesting is older Christians tend to verify things that they read based on whether it fits the things that they already know. This is the way they answer the questions in our survey, which is a great way to have your preconceptions verified. And younger people are trusting websites that just look cool. And so it's we're set up, I think, as a culture to have this question of extremism really at the center here, which is this great magnet that's pulling us all towards some sort of idealized utopian society where everyone can just get along and differences really don't matter, especially if you just keep them kind of on the sideline. And I think that's true. Sort of this whole line of discussion was raised by the question of the non-Christian, or the change in the overall population of millennials. And listen, they're living in a much more diverse world where they want to see all religions sort of equalized, and no big sort of speed bumps on anybody's life trajectory. And I think the digital space is really creating that difficulty for having really meaningful conversations about what people believe and why they believe them and why those differences are important in our society.
Right. Yes, last Christian.
I have a practical question for you, David. I'd like to know, quite frankly, I hate taking surveys, and every time any company says, "Do you want to take this survey?" I always say no. Or when they hand me the register receipt and says, "You can get $5 off if you take this survey," I say, "I don't care. I'm not taking that survey." How difficult is it to get people to take these surveys, and where do you put them? Can I participate in them if I decide I might want to take a survey for you?
Well, I hear a ukulele playing, which makes it very hard to have a technical answer to that question.
Sorry, that means we're starting to wrap up the show.
Yeah, no worries. We pay $1 million to every person who
Oh, I'm in.
And we never have a problem with response rates. No, in response rates, the whole question of data validity, even whether you can predict political outcomes. I mean, there's a whole set of questions. But the problem is survey research is still better than our best alternative, which is all of us just sitting around and having a podcast and guessing.
I think we did quite well today.
And so, we're constantly working at that. There are incentives. Mostly we have to do kind of we don't do opt-in polls, so you can't just choose to be in it. We try to use a random representative process, whether online or telephone surveys, panels, other kinds of things where we can get people. But all of us in the research industry are sort of vexed by how to get good, accurate information today. And we're doing the very best we can to stay sort of ahead of the curve in terms of digital tools and techniques and response rates with people.
And so if we wanted to participate in your surveys, we're out of luck because we just have to wait for you to invite us?
Yeah, because there has to be the principle of projectable research is the basis of a random selection. So you can't just invite the smartest 3 podcast hosts that you know.
I think that's our marketing quote right there. The smartest 3 podcast hosts I know.
You know.
David Kinnaman.
No, he said that you know.
Well, we can change that.
You know. All right, I got to wrap it up.
Thanks, David.
We're
It
out
was
of
nice
time.
to hear all your
Thanks, David.
data.
I'm going to summarize everything we just said.
Good luck. I hope you had time to think while I asked my question.
David Kinnaman, he took a poll to figure out where the American soul is shifting on religious freedom. I think we're making a bit of a scheme, and we want everybody to have freedom except those that don't agree with us. I'm not sure if we understand what it's all about. All right. I have no more energy than that today. I'm sorry.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks, David. See you
Thanks,
later.
David.
Have a good week.
See you next time.
Thanks, David.
See you guys.